So, what do survival patterns, grief, brain rewiring, and tarot all have in common? More than you think. 8 episodes, 2 months. We've walked through shadows, survival patterns, grief, and the science of change. And today, we're going to look at all of it through one of my favorite mirrors, tarot. And this isn't about predicting the future. This is about story, archetypes, and reflection, about seeing yourself more clearly in the cards, just like we've been seeing ourselves in the signs. So enjoy. Welcome back to The Void and the Flame. I'm Rachel, or Ray, nobody special, just somebody that's been through some shit like most of you. And I'm just here to share what I've learned along the way. All right, so if you're listening on audio, nothing has changed. But if you're here on, let's say, YouTube or Spotify video, hi. For the first time, you're seeing my face in this space. And I thought this was the perfect episode to really step into video because tarot isn't something that we just talk about. It's also something that you can see. The images, the archetypes, the way they tell a story. Because storytelling and metaphor is very important. And don't worry. This is not going to turn into a fortune-telling circus. I'm not here to say your ex is coming back or even that you're going to win the lottery. In my opinion, that's not tarot. Tarot is a mirror. It's metaphor. It's just like the neuroscience. It's about patterns, right? The ones we learn from, the ones we integrate and even rewire. Now, I want to explain to you how I use tarot because I think that's pretty important. I'm sure several of you have already seen tarot readers out there in the public, but tarot isn't about predicting your future, okay? It's about reflecting your present. The cards don't hand you answers. What they do is they invite you to see what's already stirring inside of you. And I like to believe that answers handed to you don't really change you. And they only stick when you discover them yourselves, right? That's what teaches you to trust your own wisdom. That's the High Priestess. That's the Magician. You already have the wisdom. You already have the tools. My role here is just to hold up the mirror. Before we dive deeper, I want to share something personal about how tarot even came into my life. The first deck I ever bought, honestly, it wasn't for spirituality at all. It was 2019 and I was throwing one of my Halloween parties. And if you've ever experienced one, I like to go all out. And I picked up a tarot deck just to use as a decoration in the witchy themed living room. That was it. It was a prop. And I didn't even see or touch that deck again for 2 years. So when 2021 hit, I had just moved and it was one of those situations where I already knew it was going to be stressful, having to deal with some of my trauma face to face every day. And that's really when my personal healing journey started. Calling myself out, noticing patterns, beginning to really do the work. And that's when I found that old deck again. It wasn't a soft, gentle deck either. It's a graphic, intense kind of a deck. Not all of the cards, but it made so much sense for Halloween. But it also meant that when I finally started reading, it pulled no punches. It gave me language for things that I didn't even have words for yet. And let me tell you what, it didn't sugarcoat a thing. So that was also the season where I fell into what I now call toxic spirituality, chasing tools and labels without grounding in real healing. And I had to learn my way out of that too. And that took quite a bit, but tarot stuck. It became a love and I loved it so much. I started pulling cards for everything. I bought books and then more decks and then even more decks. And it became almost an obsession. But looking back, I realized why. I've always loved metaphor, imagery, pattern recognition, and tarot gave me all of those in one place. And here we are 4 years later with over 50 decks and no plan to really stop collecting. But the difference now is that it's not about obsession or answers. It's about using tarot as the tool it is, not to tell the future, but to hold up a mirror. for me and for anyone else who chooses to step into this space with me. So before we get into the spread, I've taken our first 8 episodes and I've created our own little personal tarot spread. And before we get into that, I just want to pause here for a moment, because part of what makes tarot so powerful isn't just the archetypes, it's the symbols hiding in plain sight. So every card is basically a painting full of little clues, and those details matter. Like water, it almost always shows up as emotions, intuition, the stuff that runs underneath our day to day. Mountains usually mean challenge or growth, right? That climb that we've got to make to get to that wisdom. You'll see animals. One example is rabbits. Yeah, they multiply fast. So often that can mean abundance or rapid growth. But maybe for you, it might feel like overwhelm or too much too quick. And back on the subject of animals, there's even more animals. We have cats for intuition and independence. We have lions for raw courage, dogs and wolves for loyalty and instinct. Even salamanders crawling on some of the wands cards, like the King of Wands, those are fire symbols. So they're reminders of transformation and rebirth. Flowers show up too. We have roses for passion, lilies for spirituality, vines and fruit for growth and fertility. We got crowns, scales, castles, all of that. Those are the human-made symbols of power, justice, or structure. We either build up or sometimes have to tear down. So now here's the thing. These aren't hard definitions. They're invitations. Just like a dream, right? A symbol means what it stirs in you. So for one person, a rabbit might scream fertility and new beginnings, but for someone else, it might mean, holy shit, too many responsibilities hopping all over the place at once. So the point isn't that there's one right answer. It's that the image gives you a language for what's already moving inside you, if that makes sense. And here's where science really can tie into this. Our brain loves symbols. So neuropsychology shows that we process images faster and with more emotional weight than words. And I always think that that's why, actions speak louder than words too. We are more driven towards the things that we can see than just the things that we can hear. Sorry for the shake. But another layer of tarot that I really love is how it connects with not only imagery and things like that, but astrology. And you don't have to know astrology, but it makes it be able to relate and tie into you a little bit better. But when you have astrology, what's kind of cool, it layers in just that much more. And then you have the elements on top of that. So each suit in tarot ties into an element. Wands are fire, so that ties into passion, creativity, drive. Think Aries, Leo, Sagittarius. Cups are water, so emotions, intuition, relationships, and that is Cancer, Scorpio, Pisces. Now, swords are air, and that's where you dig into thoughts, communication, clarity, or sometimes mental fog too. And that's Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius. I'm an Aquarius if anyone's curious. Pentacles are earth, so they're about stability, money, body, work. Taurus, Virgo, Capricorn. It's about the tangible stuff, I always like to think. So when you see a card, you're not just looking at the image. You're looking at an element in motion, right? So fire can burn, but it can also inspire. Water can nourish, but it can also drown. Air can clarify, but it can also confuse. And earth can ground or get heavy. And here's the bridge back to science. The way you personally resonate with these elements often reflects how your nervous system processes energy. So some people run hot, fire. Some flow deep, water. Some think endlessly, air. Some crave structure and safety, and that's very much an earth sign. Tarot and astrology just give us another mirror. So it's not about fate, it's about resonance. Another symbolic system to help us understand ourselves a little bit better. So we kicked this whole thing off with naming pain in episode 1. And I feel like the card that really represents episode 1 is the Fool. being able to actually name your pain and start taking that first step is very much fool energy. Not foolish as in dumb, but fool as in bold enough to step into the unknown without a map. And here's the science part. When you start something new, your brain is literally building new wiring. So that awkward first step, that's neuroplasticity in motion. So I want you to think, where in your life are you standing on the edge of something new, even if it scares you? And I'm going to show you these cards. We're going to start with traditional Rider-Waite tarot, because this is pretty much the classic depiction of the cards with its imagery and different things like that. And a lot of times you'll see the Fool about to step off the cliff. Could be jumping. You never know. He looks like he's ready to go. He's got his bag packed. He's got the sun at his back. His loyal companion. He's good to go. He's not afraid of what happens next. It's kind of sometimes described as blind optimism. It's a leap of faith, a jump into the unknown. And this person's ready. They are ready to leave what they already know behind and jump into something new. Now, I pulled from 3 different decks just so you can see the variation in imagery, because every deck is going to be different based on the artist that creates that deck. A lot of it is based on the more original, widely known version, like the Rider-Waite, and you can take that and kind of make it into what you want. Like, I love that she's kind of stepping on the heads of the people in her past and moving forward. And then you have simple imagery too. Sometimes it just looks like a gesture, because when you think of Fool, think of silly, you think childlike almost. And the Fool being the very first step of the journey, it is kind of childlike, right? You're starting something new. You're moving into the unknown. There's some feelings of fear behind that, but also excitement and exhilaration, because you never know what's on the other side, or should I say at the bottom of that cliff that you choose to jump off of. And really giving yourself the opportunity to not be afraid of what could come next, and noticing that, you might have everything you need in order to make this next step of the journey amazing. So once you take that step, what do you realize? What do you think you realize when you take that first step into the Fool? I will tell you. You're not empty-handed. You've already got the tools. And that brings us into episode 2 and brings us to the Magician. Now, this is about rewiring and neuroplasticity. And here enters the Magician. The message here is the tools are already in your hands. It's not about getting new ones. It's about using what you've got. So neuroscience really backs that up when it explains that whatever pathways you actually practice are the ones that grow stronger, because attention is energy, right? So I want you to ponder, what strength or resource are you maybe underestimating in yourself right now? Because if you go based on the power of the Magician, you have all the tools you need to create the existence, the life that you want. A lot of people will look at the Magician as like the manifestation card, because if you go back, I'll just scroll here a little bit. Whoops, as I fling cards. If you go back to the original, more known version of the Magician card, he always has like a table and he's doing some, it almost looks like magic. I like to consider it alchemy. And he's got one arm up, one arm down, as above, so below. It's a good reminder too that what you put out into the world is what you tend to get back. But it's a gentle reminder to let you know that after you take the first steps of the Fool and take that journey into the unknown, that you have all the tools that you need to create your new existence, whatever it is that you're looking for. So I think that's really important. On top of that, tools aren't the whole story. So underneath it all, there are patterns we can't always see running the show. That brings us to episode 3. And the card, I feel like really that inhabits episode 3 is the High Priestess. Now, this episode was all about survival patterns: freeze, fawn, dissociation. That's High Priestess territory. She's the keeper of what's hidden, subconscious wisdom, those quiet scripts that run the show even when we don't realize it. So if we were to look at this in science terms, it would say trauma responses live in implicit memory. Your body remembers even when your mind doesn't, okay? And that kind of correlates with memory fog, our last episode too, because your body always remembers even when your mind might not. And here's the question that I want to ask you with the High Priestess. What hidden patterns might be shaping your choices more than you think? You know, what kind of patterns are running in the background that you might not realize that they're running because they've been running for so long? It doesn't really make you stop and think like, hey, is this a pattern that maybe I should break? Maybe I should take a look at this, because it's what you know, right? So being able to really reflect on that and like call yourself out for those kind of things is really important. I'm not sure if I told you, but this is the Dreamkeeper's tarot deck. This was probably the 3rd tarot deck I ever purchased, and it is one of my all-time favorites. I just love the depiction in these cards. They're just beautiful. They're visually beautiful. And then this is one of my newest decks. I bought 4 new decks. This was one of them, and this is the Lost Souls tarot. And it's beautiful. It's like black backdrop with white, gold. I think some of the cards have orange in them, which is really beautiful. So tarot all on its own, just with its imagery, can be very appealing. It can really draw you in. And I really love that. I am a creative at heart, so art, music, all that kind of stuff, creating, DIY, is just really important to me. And I love it. So, but that's just me. And for any of those of you that are familiar with tarot, you might be expecting me to say the Empress next, right? If you know tarot, you know that's the next card that is following the Fool's Journey. But we are going to skip that because I feel like the next episode that we had covered really is represented by the Star. So if you're new to tarot, here's why that's funny. The major arcana is laid out like a story, again, called the Fool's Journey. And in that story, the Empress usually comes right after the High Priestess, and then the Emperor, and so on and so forth. And I'll circle back to explain more about that later, the Fool's Journey. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and jump right in. Episode 4, the Star. This was the one we talked about music. That music was medicine. And that's pure star energy, because the card of hope, healing, light after the storm. And science agrees that music lights up multiple regions of the brain at once. It regulates mood, it calms the amygdala, and even releases dopamine. So what's your star? A song, a symbol, something that reminds you that you're not alone. And I just want to show you each one of these really quick. The Star card, I didn't really do this before, but the Star card is actually one of the Aquarius cards. So I love the Star card very much. I've always been a very hopeful, make-a-wish kind of gal, so it seems very fitting to be an Aquarius and having one of your tarot cards for your sign be the Star. Anyways, back to it. Healing and light only come after something ends, right? So after we've had to let something die so something new can be born, and that can be really scary. And I feel like a lot of people look at this next card like it's something to be afraid of. And episode 5 was Brian's story of grief and protective withdrawal. That's death. Not as in literal death, but transformation. Something ending so something else can be born. That's super important. You have to get rid of the old to make room for the new. And neuroscience even shows grief rewires the brain, right? So those old, this person exists in my world pathways break down, and that hurts when they no longer exist. So I want to know what in your own life is asking to be released so that something new can grow. Have you thought about that yet? What do you think that you could let go in order for something potentially newer and better to be born? So the death card really is all about death and rebirth. And again, not literal death. It doesn't even have to do with emotions. It could be, well, I guess it all does have to do with emotions, but having to leave a job because it drains the life out of you, and doing so makes way for something even better, something maybe you weren't expecting. But again, that means you have to, it's like removing clutter from your home, because I feel like a lot of us declutter our homes only to just ultimately create more space for more stuff. It's kind of the same concept. You have to let go of the old to be able to bring in the new. And that could be mindsets, it could be jobs, it could be people, it could be countless things. It depends on you and your situation. So you can really take that however it resonates for you and in your life. And if episode 5 resonated with you, your card is the death card. So once you've let something go, the question becomes, how do you carry strength forward without just hardening into armor, right? Because then we go into episode 6, which the card I've chose for episode 6 is the strength card. So then we move into like hyper independence, and that's heavy armor. And the strength card flips that script, right? So real resilience isn't brute force. It's soft courage. It's compassion. And the science? Self-compassion literally lowers stress by activating your parasympathetic nervous system. So ask yourself, where could softening actually make you maybe stronger than just trying to hold it all together? Because I feel like as Americans, or anybody living in the US, we have a tendency to try to want to hold on to everything so tightly, when really some of those things we need to just kind of let go of. Like, maybe they aren't really serving our path. Maybe they aren't making us stronger. Maybe they are kind of weakening us, because it's armor that we wear when things like that happen, right? So we have to really shed that armor. We have to have that strength and that courage to realize that sometimes softness isn't a detriment, and that alone in itself can be so strong. So let's go over these cards really quick. I mean, look at this lady. She ain't afraid of nothing. She's got that tiger's mouth in her hands. Like, I almost wonder sometimes when I look at this card if she's going to try to stick her head in there. I mean, I really hope not, but she's not scared. She's not afraid at all. And I always like to tell people, I feel like whenever you have to pull forth strength to accomplish anything, that kind of denotes a little bit of fear behind whatever it is that you're working towards. And a lot of times people will use fear almost as like a way to not move forward. You get so stuck in that fear response that you feel like you're frozen and you can't move forward. And sometimes if you can just muster up a little bit of courage, a little bit of strength, then you can push past and move into that next stage. And at the end of it, you actually get to really see and realize just how strong you truly are. And here's the thing. When you start softening, sometimes that old cage and the identities just don't fit anymore. And that's when things really start to break down. And that leads me into episode 7. And the cards I've chose for episode 7 are the Tower and Judgment. And we'll start with the Tower. So this is one of two card. This is a one of two card story about outgrowing cages, shedding identities. That's definitely very much Tower energy. Painful, messy, but necessary collapse. And Judgment is what comes after. It's like the awakening, the call to rise into something new. And neuroscience even maps this. Like, identity shifts feel like danger to the brain, but new wiring makes rebirth really possible. So let me just show you these a little bit. The Tower traditionally has fire and destruction, and two people, one they say fell and one they say jumped, because if you're at the top of a burning building, either you stay and burn or accidentally fall, or you choose to jump That's a scary thought when you put it that way, or when I put it that way, rather. But the Tower is another one of those cards that I feel like people really get afraid of because it looks chaotic. It looks destructive. It's like everything burning down to the ground. But the beautiful thing about the Tower, and the beautiful thing about letting everything kind of just crumble to the ground, is that you get to take those bricks from that old foundation and you get to create something new, something better, something stronger. I'm sure there are plenty of people out there that can relate to having built a foundation. Let's say people, let's look at relationships, right? You spend many years with someone and then all of a sudden it ends. It all comes crashing down. And that can feel very destructive. It can be very painful. And it can almost feel like you're free falling. Like, I don't know what to do next. Like, I just spent a lot of my life building my world around somebody else and now they're gone. What comes next? I like to think with the Tower, you're not starting from scratch. You are now starting from experience. So you get to pick the lessons, not pick, but really look at the lessons that you got to learn, how you were able to grow from that last relationship. Take the good bits, the parts that really help you and will help lead you to become more of you, and you start to build another foundation, one that is more secure, more stable than the one before that. And then if we're going to talk more about the Judgment card, a lot of people look at this card as like a very kind of religious card, I guess. A lot of times it's depicted with angels, or it looks like an angel. And Judgment to me is about awakening. It's about ascending. It's about moving past the last version of ourselves. We've learned the lessons that we need to learn, and now we can move forward into something better. And that also moves us one step closer to the very last card in the Fool's Journey, which I'll tell you is the World. Cycles complete. You know, the patterns have ended. The loop you're on is now done. You can jump off the hamster wheel and move into your next adventure, move into the next best thing for you. I want you to ponder, what would freedom look like for you on the inside? And as you step out of those cages, the path forward isn't always clear. Sometimes it feels confusing, even foggy. And that leads us to episode 8, and the card I chose is the Moon. And finally, we talk about memory fog and fractured time. That is very much the Moon. Confusion, shadowy, sometimes scary, but also deeply intuitive. And science says that trauma distorts the hippocampus. So this is why memories get filed in fragments and in fog. And when you really start to focus on that and you start to realize that maybe some of the reasons why I have spotty memory or things don't seem as clear as they could be, it could be a trauma response. It could be because of past situations that have caused your brain to do all sorts of fun things. I believe they said that like your brain can literally shrink over time based on like narcissistic abuse and that kind of stuff. Don't quote me on that. But the Moon is very much a card kind of about illusion. And you see the wolves on there and they're howling. So I really want you to kind of maybe notice where in your life right now things might feel like the Moon energy, you know, a little unclear, foggy, maybe hard to see straight. And how could you bring in just a little more light? The Moon card can talk about the unknown, you know, because when you think about the Moon, it's dark outside, right? And in the dark, it's harder to see things clearly. Now, this doesn't mean that things are going to be unclear or they're going to be dark or foggy forever, because the card that comes after the Moon is actually the Sun card, and that is the happiest card in the deck. So once you can push past illusions, when you can see things for what they really are, but also give time for things to really come up to the surface, because the moon card can talk about emotions, thoughts, feelings, any of that bubbling to the surface. Allowing those things the time they need to come up without trying to force it, because I feel like sometimes when we force things, we don't see things as clearly as we should, and that just leads into illusion. So when we really give time for the fog to dissipate and for things to clear up, and we bring a little bit more light to the situation, we can then really start to see things more clearly. And sometimes you just have to give yourself the time to do that. So when you lay these 8 cards, well, I should say 9 cards, because episode 7 had 2 cards. But when you lay these cards side by side, you have the Fool, the Magician, the High Priestess, then we go into the Star, Death, Strength, the Tower, and Judgment, leading us all the way into the Moon. You can actually see the whole arc of what we've been walking through together. I mean, it's not 8 random episodes. It's a whole spread, a story, a map. And we started with the courage to step out, which is the Fool. And we discovered our tools, which is the Magician. We've uncovered our blueprints, and that's the High Priestess. And we've reached for hope and healing. That's the Star. We've faced endings, the Death card. We've redefined strength card. Broke free of the cages, which is the Tower and Judgment, and learned how to navigate the fog, ending with the Moon. That's the Fool's journey in a miniature version. And it's also our journey so far. Not about predicting what comes next, but about making sense of where we've been and what's still shaping in us right now. And giving ourselves that time to let things progress and to form as they should. Now, I want to circle back to what I mentioned earlier, the Fool's journey. So in neuroscience, rewiring doesn't happen all at once. It's a path. Tarot's Fool's journey is kind of the same. It's a symbolic path of becoming. So you start with the Fool, you step into the unknown, and then you meet the teachers, you face challenges, you grow stronger, confront illusions, shed old skins, and finally awaken into something more whole. So it's not fortune telling. It's not about this card means you're doomed, or even this card means you're destined for greatness. It's a symbolic map, a way to see your own healing journey laid out in pictures and archetypes. And when you look at it through that lens, and even along neuroscience, it's pretty powerful, because tarot doesn't give you the answers. It helps you discover the ones that were inside you all along. And I think that's super beautiful. So that's our spread. 8 episodes, 8 archetypes, 8 mirrors. Tarot didn't tell us anything new. It reflected what we've already lived and talked about here together. And if you've been with me since episode 1, I want you to think about which one of these cards feels most alive for you right now. And if you're new, maybe use this as a guide as to which episode might be good for you to go to or start with. You know, just a little tool for that too. And I want to throw this out there. If you don't have your own deck, but you're curious, and you'd like to do like a daily card pull, DM me, email me. I'd be more than happy to pull a card for you. You can even try to interpret it yourself. See what your intuition wants to tell you. See what comes up for you, because that's what's really important. But I could also walk you through what comes up, you know, walk you through the meanings. No fortune telling, no guarantees about the future, just reflection in the present moment. And actually, I am opening up readings in a new way. So if you've ever wanted a personal tarot reading, your first one is free. It'll be a short video, a simple 3-card pull that I'll send directly to you. This is your chance to maybe experience how the cards can speak, how I read, and how you connect with the messages. And after that, I'll be offering deeper readings. So if there's anyone who wants to go deeper into that, that will be an option as well. But this first one, consider it my gift for walking this journey with me. It really means so much to have you all here, because here's what I know. When you recognize your truth in archetypes, it lands, it sticks. It teaches you to trust your own wisdom, your own intuition, and your own strength. And next week, we're stepping into something a lot of us have probably felt, but not many of us talk about, and that's being told that we're too much. The episode is called You Were Never Too Much. We're going to talk about sensitivity, emotional intensity, and why the problem was never your too muchness, it was their too littleness. So come back, bring your fire, your depth, and your sensitivity, all of you. And until then, remember, you already have the wisdom of the High Priestess, the tools of the Magician, and the courage of strength. And you don't have to keep the fire lit. Although, I'll see you next week.